Hi everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. It's Karen here with another tutorial for you. We're inching closer and closer to the holidays, and I've got a cute and lovely tutorial for you. It's something I've been working on a while. I kind of put it down for a while and I picked it back up. It's this beautiful vintage lacy inspired scarf. Now, it's currently looking like a cowl, and that's because I started it off as a scarf, and then sadly I ran out of yarn. I actually really thought I was going to have enough, but I did run out of it, and unfortunately this particular color was discontinued. So you're going to see it all unfold live in the video, but I hope that you'll take away how pretty this design is. It's just a lattice stitch work mixed in with some really pretty puff stitches, and I just think it adds this beautiful, elegant touch of vintage charm to it. So if you're looking for a really pretty, different scarf design, then today's tutorial is for you. So let's get to it. Okay, so let's talk about the yarn that I'm using for this project. It is the Wool Like yarn by Loops and Threads, and it is a finer weight yarn. So let's see here. It is a super fine #1, and it does contain 620 meters or 678 yards. So there's a lot of yardage here. Comes in 100-gram skeins. Now for my scarf, this is going to be plenty. As you can see here, the shawl that they've created on this photo here, I believe it takes, I think it says right here, it takes 2 balls. So with one of these, I think you're going to have a very good sized lacy type of scarf. So that is the yarn, and the hook size I'm going to be using, is a 3.75 millimeter hook. It is a smaller hook than I normally like to use. It's also known as an F or a size 5. They actually recommend using a 3.5 millimeter hook, but the smallest hook I have is a 3.25, and I just felt like it was a bit too small. So that is the hook size I'm going to use. Now, if you pick up this skein, don't be confused, because it says here, where does it say? It says 8 millimeter hook on the back, but what they're referring to is this project here. So sometimes when you buy a skein, it'll come with a little free pattern on the inside of the label. So don't be confused. That's what they're talking about. So in general, see, this is for the fringed wrap. In general, this is the recommended hook size for this yarn. Of course, you can use whatever size you like. You guys know me. I always kind of change up the hook sizes a little bit. So, but I am using a 3.75 millimeter hook for this project. And then, as always, just make sure that you have a yarn needle on hand to sew in your ends. And as always, a pair of scissors to snip your yarn. That's it. That's all. Now let's get started working up our scarf. Okay, so let's get started, and for the first little chain row, I'm going to go up a little bit of a hook size here, okay? Because we have really fine yarn, we don't want that first row to bunch up. So I am using the 3.75 millimeter hook for the entirety of the project, but for my chains, I'm going to use a 4.5 millimeter hook. Now you could go up a 4 to a 4, but I just thought a 4.5 was going to do the trick. So you're going to take your yarn with your slightly larger hook, and we're just going to place a slip knot on our hook here. Okay, just like that. And so what we want to do is we want to do our initial foundation chain, and we are going to do a total of 70 stitches. Okay, so you're just going to yarn over and pull through, and you're going to keep going until you've chained 70. I want you to notice that I'm keeping it somewhat relaxed. See that? So that when we work subsequent rows, this eventually tends to bunch in a little bit. So for now, I'm just keeping them not too loose, but I'm going to keep them relaxed enough that I'll be able to work into these chains for row #1. Okay, so I have 70 chains completed. So I have something that looks like this. Okay, and you can see really nice and loose. It's got some stretch to it. So we're gonna go on to row #1, and I'm gonna get rid of my larger hook, and I'm going to bring back my 3.75 millimeter hook. And we're going to begin our mesh stitch section, which is the diamond mesh stitch. And so what we're going to do is we are going to find the 6th chain from our hook. Remember, we never count the loop that's on the hook. See how this one's already starting to tighten up? That is why we wanted to use a slightly larger hook there. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And into that 6th chain, all we're going to do is we are going to slip stitch. Okay, just like that. So you have that little loop at the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to chain 3. So we have 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to skip the next chain, and into the following chain, we are going to slip stitch. And this is going to be the repeat. See those little chain loops? That's going to be the repeat for row number 1. So again, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. We're going to skip the next chain, and into the following, we are going to slip stitch. So every time you chain 3, skip 1, and slip stitch. 1, 2, 3. Skip a chain, and into the following, you're going to slip stitch. So this will keep you busy for a little while for the first row. Okay, just like that. So you will end up having a bunch of little loops. Whoops, that looks like that. Okay, so go ahead and do that all the way to the end of your chain, and then I'll meet up with you to talk about row number 2. Okay, so I'm just coming up to the end here, and I have 2 chains left just right there. So you're just going to do your usual 3 chains, skip 1, and then to the very last chain, you are going to slip stitch. Okay. All right, so row number 1 is complete, and I have 32 of these little loops here. Okay, so it doesn't look like much just yet, but you can see that they are creating like a little scalloped edge there. So we're going to go on to row number 2, which is essentially a repeat of row number 1, but it's much easier to find where you need to place your hook. So you will chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. You'll turn your work, and now we will always work into these chain loops, which will be nice and easy to see there. So right away into that first loop, we just slip stitch. Okay, and then chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Find your next loop, which is right there. Now these chains are stretching a bit, don't panic. It'll be a-okay. Just look for your chain loops and then slip stitch. 1, 2, 3, chain loop and slip stitch. So you get the gist. Okay, so this will eventually create that really cool little diamond mesh stitch. See that? Okay, so I know it's still hard to visualize a little bit at this point in the game, but you're going to do that all the way to the end of row number 2. You will slip stitch into the very last chain loop. I will meet up with you here just to kind of talk you through looping back up around. Okay, so I have 1 more loop left, and as we've been doing, just chain 3 at the very end of your row. You just go into that loop, so into the space, we don't go into any chains, and you slip stitch. And that is the end of your row. And then all you're going to do is chain 3, turn your work, and you always just work into that very next chain loop. See how it already looks like a diamond shape there? So that's all you're going to do. So you don't have to worry about the edges and things like that because they will eventually even out. Okay, so then you just continue. Chain 3 into the next chain loop, which is right there. and you slip stitch. Okay, so you're going to keep doing this now until you have a total of 20 rows. Okay, so you're just going to work up that mesh stitch for a total of 20 rows. So you can start to see a little bit how that diamond shape is coming into play. And that's it, super easy, chain 3 and slip stitch. Okay, so I'll meet back up with you once you've finished your 20 rows. Okay, so I have completed 20 rows. So now you can really see that mesh stitch is coming to life there. And you can really see how the diamond shape is taking form. Okay, so now we're going to go on to row number 21, where we're going to create just a little bit of a difference in the texture. We're going to be using that puff stitch. So I've just come to the end of this row here. And by the way, see how the edge works itself out with subsequent rows. So don't worry if in the beginning it looks a little bumpy. Okay, so I've come up to the end of my mesh stitch row. So I'm still going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to turn my work, and into the very first chain loop, which is right there, we're going to place 1 puff stitch. Okay, so we're going to yarn over, insert our hook. You're going to pull up a loop and you're going to stretch it to the height of that chain 3. Okay, then I'm going to yarn over again, insert, pull up another loop, same thing, and then one more time, yarn over, insert, and pull up a loop. Now, for the puff stitch, some people will pull up 5 times. I, a lot of times, will only pull up 3 times, depending on the project. So sometimes I call this a little mini puff, but this is the technique. So currently I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on my hook. So I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to pull through 5 of these, okay, so that I still have 2 loops on the hook. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both of them. And I like to do it that way because it just really solidifies the puff portion of the stitch. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the next chain loop, and we are going to place 2 puff stitches. So again, I'm going to yarn over, insert, pull up once, and I like to use my finger here to secure that loop. Then I insert, pull up twice, yarn over again, insert and pull up 3 times, yarn over, pull through the first 5, and then pull through the 2. So you've got 2 puff stitches there. So the first puff stitch of every row of puff stitches, I'm only going to place 1 puff stitch in that space because we also have that chain 3 that will count as a stitch. But in every other chain space, I'm going to place 2 puff stitches. So I've already done 1, and now we're going to do a second one. So we'll insert once, twice, 3 times. Pull through and pull through 2. Okay, so you've got 2 puff stitches in that space. Just looks like a little V right there. And that is what I'm going to do all the way to the end of my row. So I'm going to insert 1 puff stitch by pulling through 3 times. And then I'm going to insert 1 more, 2, and 3. Okay, so your work looks something like that. Isn't that pretty? Just creates a little bit of detailed texture there. Okay, so you're going to continue going all the way to the end, and I will meet up with you in your last chain space. Okay guys, sad story. So this is the length that I have right now. It's not very long, so this is what I've got. And I just realized that this color is discontinued. So it is the beige color. And I thought something was weird a few months back when they were putting a lot of their skeins on sale, like really low, like $3. So I scooped up a bunch of white because I always knew I was going to use white, but I didn't bother getting any of the beige because I figured that I would have plenty. But as it turns out, this is a really short scarf, and it's a shame because look at how pretty this texture is. I think it would have been really pretty as a beautiful long scarf. So what we have to do when we get lemons is make lemonade. So I'm going to turn this into a cowl, and this is all I have left. So this is going to be a crossover cowl, okay? And so instead of just joining it and creating a ring like we normally do, what I'm going to do is I am going to fold it. So imagine your neck is here, so you fold it down this way and you fold it down this way. And I am going to then just sew these two ends together. So it'll kind of look like, what do they call that? An infinity scarf. Yes, it'll kind of look like an infinity scarf. But because it's so very lightweight, what I'm aiming for is for a scarf that'll be kind of nice. Sometimes under your jacket, you just want a little something around your neck, but not really a big bulky scarf. So that is what I've decided we're going to do with this, and it will still look nice and pretty. So I made sure to have the same number of rows at the end here. In fact, I actually did frog a few rows once I realized that I was not going to have enough yarn. So that way at least it looks nice and even. And again, I'll show you the idea. So you're laying it flat. It is the same on both sides, so it doesn't really matter. So I will take the scarf and bring it down here, and then take the other end, and now I'm going to line this up. So essentially, you would fit your head and your neck through here, and then you can fold it over, and I think it will look really, really nice and pretty. So what we're going to do now is we are going to slip stitch across the end here. And then with the remaining bit of yarn, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to continue to work up the width by creating a little border round on each end. And this way I can use up the yarn and create more width, and it won't look too weird. So here we go. We are making this work. Okay, so I'm going to take, so basically, okay, so I'm going to just turn this around now once I've determined that these two sides are going to go together. And I'm just going to match it up stitch by stitch or loop by loop. So I've just got a little chain one there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this loop, and then I'm going to insert my hook into the very first loop here. Now, because we are working with loops, I'm actually going to do a single crochet. I was initially going to do slip stitches, but I think single crochet will work best. So I'm just going to pull that through and single crochet. Okay. And then I'm going to place another single crochet in this loop. So each loop is going to get 2 single crochets, and I'm going to make sure to work in through the front and the back. So I'm going to skip this here because this belongs to the row below, and I'm going to go into the next loop. And then I'm going to match up here. So that's already worked. And then I'm going to match up here. So there's 1 and 2. Then again into the next loop and match up. Make sure I don't work into the same worked stitch. And 2. Okay, so that's what we're going to do all the way down to the end until we've sewn these two sides together. Okay, so I have seamed up the two ends together, so that's what it looks like. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to put this seam to the inside. And it actually doesn't make a big deal because I think the seam on the outside would have been just fine, but I just feel like I'm going to be happier with it on the inside. And then your cowl will look something like this, and you'll have a lot of room to fold it over. And then this will be placed, this part will go flat against the chest underneath the collar of your coat, just like that. Pretty. Okay, so what I want to do now, and I've got this much left, so hopefully I will get through it, is I just want to create a nice little finishing border around hopefully both sides. So both on this side and then on this side here. So with my seam on the inside, I am now going to work along the side of these rows. And so we're just going to work into these little chain spaces. So it's going to be nice and easy to see because it's all this diamond mesh stitch. Isn't that pretty? So what we're going to do is we're going to use our puff stitch. So I've come to the end here and there's a little bit of a gap here. So what I'm going to do, just going to hide that tail for a second, is I'm not going to work into this. I'm going to go into this little loop here, and that was the beginning of that row, and I'm just going to insert and single crochet. And this is just going to bring it a little closer together so it doesn't overly stretch. And at this point, you know, your stitch count will kind of vary here and there. So it's just a matter of making sure that it's going to look nice and uniform. Okay. And at this point, you know, the aim is always, of course, to keep our stitch count consistent. But a project like this, you know, there's a lot of give and take. So the main thing is to make sure that it looks nice to your eye and it sits nice and even. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to chain up 3, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to work back into this stitch and we're going to place a puff stitch. So I'm going to yarn over, insert, pull up, and a second time, and a third time. So you can see it stretches it out a little bit. Now I'm going to yarn over, pull through all of those loops except one, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through. That's my puff stitch, and now I'm going to chain 1. So this is going to help my puff stitches sit nice and relaxed next to each other. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to find the very next chain loop, which is right there, the next row, and I'm going to do the same thing. So a puff stitch into each of these chain loops, and we're going to separate them by a chain stitch. So there you go. I'm going to yarn over, pull through all of them except the last one, yarn over and pull through 2. So that's the puff stitch, and then I'm going to chain 1. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to find the next chain space and puff stitch. So this one will be a nice little project to do while you're watching TV or listening to a podcast, because the loops just present themselves for you right there. There we go. So that is what I'm going to keep doing. And now I'm going to let you go and finish this part on your own. I'm going to meet up with you when you get to that first row of puff stitches, just so that I can take you through how I'm going to work across that and make it look nice and uniform. So go ahead and finish these puff stitches, and I'll meet you in just a minute. Okay, so I have done 9 puff stitches across for my length. Yours may be 10, it may be 8, maybe it's 12. So just as long as it looks nice and uniform, which I'm very happy with, it looks nice and relaxed, it's not bunching or buckling. And now I've got one more little space here before I hit that puff stitch. So I am going to work into this little space here where the puff was worked into originally. So I'm going to do 3 pull throughs and yarn overs, and then pull through, chain 1. And now I've come to the row of the actual puff stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to insert my hook in between this puff stitch and this puff stitch. So I thought about going in the middle, but this is essentially going to stretch a little bit and I didn't want to pull apart this stitch. So I'm actually just going to go in between these stitches, makes it nice and easy, and then do a puff stitch there. And I'm going to try and keep it as centered as I can. And then pull through, and chain 1. Okay. You can move that around a little bit. So I want it to be fairly centered on this row. And then I'm just going to go into the very next space here. So this is actually the first loop, because this one here belongs to the row inwards. So I'm going to go here and do another puff. So you see a lot of this is just kind of eyeballing and seeing what looks nice to you. So puff stitch and chain one, and then just have a look. If you find that this one's leaning over too much, then you might have gone too far away, but I think that's going to be okay. So I'm going to work the next few, and that's always a good way to gauge, is work a few stitches away from that spot, and then you can see how they naturally will sit. So I'm going to do one more, next chain space there. So there's 2 and there's 3 and chain 1. So let's see. So I'm just kind of letting it sit on its own, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So you've got the puff stitch, this vertical one sits right in the middle here. And I like the idea of the actual puff stitches being the stitch to anchor the whole project. I really like that actually. All right, that's all we're gonna do for this border round. So you're gonna go all the way around now, and this, by the way it's sewn together, it will work like an infinity scarf. So you're gonna just continue doing puff stitches all the way around, and then you're gonna get to your seam and go, hey, where's the beginning? You keep going, you keep going, you keep going, going, and eventually you do come back to where we began. So it's basically, it is an infinity cowl. So it's nice and easy, nothing crazy, and I'm really hoping that what I have left is going to be enough to at least give me the opportunity to use these puff stitches for a border. If by any chance I happen to have a little bit left over, I would go and do just one extra little round of something simple. It's either going to be single crochets or more of this mesh stitch, but I don't know if I'm going to have any left. So let's quell our ambitions for now and stick to these puff stitches. And I will meet back up with you and let you see how I made out. So hopefully you will have the same luck if you are using the same skein. Okay, so here we go. I made it. So we've got this beautiful little border here on each side. And I really feel like it finished it off. It really gave it a nice finished off look, and it went all the way around, thankfully. And I have just this little bit left. And you know what? I am going to play a little quick game of crochet chicken. I am going to do one more round, but only going to use single crochet stitches to see if I can just get right to the end of this, because I hate having these little leftover bits and bobs, and most especially because I won't be able to find this color again. So I'm just going to check real quick if I will be able to do one more little finishing round here. And you can see up close, everything sits so nicely, and it just creates this little beautiful tie-in between the puff stitches on the side as well as along the border, and nice and lacy, but still nice and cozy. Okay, so all I'm gonna do is I've slip stitched to join here. So I've chained one, and I'm gonna work a single crochet into the actual, whoops, I picked up that tail there, into the actual stitch, the puff stitch. And remember, we chained one between each puff stitch. So I'm just going to go in the space, single crochet, and then into the puff stitch. And that's basically what I'm going to do. So in between the stitches, and then into the puff. And again, in between the puffs, and then into the top. Okay, so it's just giving an extra little bit of a more defined edge. And that's simply just because, again, I've got this bit left and I want to use it all. If you used all your yarn and you didn't have any left over, this edge is just as pretty. Look at that. And I love how this design creates a bit of a stretch in the project. So if you don't have any left, you're pretty much done, but I am just going to see how much I can squeeze out of this if I can get that last round of single crochet stitches. Well, here it is. It's the final reveal, and it's not quite a scarf exactly. So I did sew the two ends together and turned it into a cowl, and I added a little twist here so it looks like an infinity cowl. And I do still like how it came out. It has that pretty lacy vintage look. And actually what I really like about a cowl over a scarf sometimes is that it takes away the bulk inside your coat that a longer scarf can create. So I was actually, in the end, quite happy with this. I'm not going to lie, I would have loved to have created a long scarf with this design. Unfortunately, I just couldn't find the matching color, and I wasn't willing to do color blocking. But I hope that you'll take the design and run with it. So you can use all kinds of colors and do them in whatever colorway you choose. But I would love to see it if you guys would create a long scarf with this really pretty lacy design. I'm really curious to see how it would come out. So that's it for today. Now, if you have any questions, as always, please do leave them for me in the comment box down below. And you can also reach me directly. I know a lot of you like to email me directly, so feel free to do so at info@crochetcrafty.com. And remember, come and check out the website, crochetcrafty.com. There's lots of free goodies there for you and a lot of fabulous resource tools for you as well. So make sure to do that. And I love it when you come say hi to me on the socials. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. All right, guys, I hope you are having a wonderful holiday season and having a great time working on more of your holiday projects. So take good care of yourselves. Remember to stay healthy and have an amazing day. Happy crocheting. And I'll see you guys in next week's session. Now, I know it will be Christmas Day, but there will be a little treat waiting for you on Christmas Day evening. I know a lot of times there's some downtime in the evening, and I know I always like to kind of search the web and see what's happening with my crochet friends. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, take care, and I'll see you next time. Happy holidays!